Hello again, friends. Welcome back to Navigational Mind. I'm Dr. Toye Oyelese, and today we're turning right into that dense patch of fog you sometimes find inside your own mind. You know the one, where everything feels muddled, and you can't quite tell what you're feeling or why you keep circling the same worries. That's what this episode is about: articulation. The word itself sounds clinical, but really, it's the most human thing. It's how we turn that inner fog into something you can actually move through, not just sit and stew in. I'll try not to slip into too many metaphors about weather, but, well, fog is the best one I've got. So let's get specific. What is articulation? It's not just talking about your feelings, and it's not some polished, let me explain myself performance either. It's really the act of distilling those jumbled, unruly sensations, nervousness, longing, even that vague sense that something's off, into clear enough shapes that your mind can recognize and work with. I always say articulation is about self-precision, not self-display. Even before I had fancy terms for it, I was doing this in my little notebook as a junior doctor, scribbling things like, I want to help, but I feel unseen. Utterly simple, but for me, that line was more helpful than a whole pile of pep talks. Before you articulate, it's chaos, just a swirl of feelings bumping into each other. Part of you wants to disappear, part wants to shout, part just wants a nap. But after you name it, something shifts. Instead of a foggy mass, there's a contour. Ah, this is what's happening for me. Enough that I can do something with it. That's the real heart of articulation. It makes your mind legible, not to impress anyone, but to let you move. And look, I'm not perfect at this myself. Even now, decades in, I'll sometimes go a week before realizing, oh, there's a fog here because I'm not actually sure what I want, or which part of me is stressing out. So, if this is new to you, you're not alone, and you're not lost, just not quite articulated yet. Now, let's take a closer look at that big confusing fog. Why does it show up so reliably? From all the listening I've done, patients, family, my own journal, it's pretty clear that mental fog pops up whenever experience hasn't quite settled into words or understanding. Think about it like in our earlier episodes. Remember when we talked about those different residents of your mind, all living together like a slightly rowdy family? Fog is what happens when they're all talking at once, or when one of them is panicking and nobody's listening. Or you've just lost the plot entirely on what matters to you. Common culprits are things like emotional overload without any real structure. Maybe you feel too much at once, or you're picking up on some subtle change in your inner rhythm but can't quite name it. Sometimes something inside collapses, your direction vanishes. Suddenly nothing feels clear, and you might even mistake that for being lazy or broken. I've had patients come in convinced they're somehow defective because they should be able to fix this. But actually, the mind just hasn't, mapped itself properly in that moment. I'd ask you, have you ever found yourself thinking, I'm just stuck, I must be weak? I have, more times than I care to admit. But what if, instead, you said, I'm foggy because I haven't articulated what's going on yet? That one little reframing takes it from a moral judgment to a structural observation. There's nothing wrong with your engine. You just haven't figured out which wire leads to the right switch. There's something gentle in that. It stops you from attacking yourself and gets you curious instead. You'll probably recognize from previous episodes this is very similar to how we talk about internal friction and direction. Fog isn't a personal failure. It's the system searching for bearings. And when you treat fog as a signal rather than a verdict, then you're starting to get ready for the practice of articulation itself. So how do you actually do this? How do you turn all that fog into something you can steer by? Over the years, and after a lot of trial and error, often with my patients, but even more with myself, I've landed on 3 levels of articulation. First up, emotional articulation. This just means naming what you're actually feeling, straight up, and without layering on judgment or performance. It's less, I'm supposed to feel grateful, and more, I feel ashamed about how little I've done, or I'm scared of losing something important. Not fancy, just honest. Next is what I call structural articulation. This is where our inner house from episode 2 comes back in. Who's actually talking? Is it your trust, who just wants reassurance? Your autonomy, who needs some space? Or your initiative, getting itchy to do something new? Sometimes all 4 show up at once, and it's a cacophony. But when you name which residents are present, and what each wants, you start to see the map, not just the fog. Last, and perhaps the trickiest, is directional articulation. Here, you're sensing for the faintest emerging orientation, where, if you really listened, is your system leaning. Maybe you notice, something in me wants to move toward a slower life, or something in me is pulling away from this job. Half the time, it's a whisper, not a marching order, but the direction is there if you sit with it. These 3 together, they turn experience into navigation. Not perfection, not performance, and definitely not over-explaining. In fact, sometimes too many words just build new walls of fog. As I tell my residents at the clinic, don't aim for eloquence, just aim for accuracy that's good enough. Want a practical start? Here's my 5-step micro practice. This works whether you've got 5 minutes over coffee or 30 seconds in the elevator. Trust me. First, pause and notice. What am I actually feeling in my body right now? Second, put a simple sentence to it. I feel. Third, check which parts of you or which resident voices are showing up. And what do they each want? No drama, just honest noticing. Fourth, if you listen closely, what direction, even faintly, is emerging? Then fifth, and this is key, write down a single, precise line that captures that moment. Not a diary page, just one true sentence. I remember a patient once came to me, just saying, I'm lost. Over several sessions, as we named what was actually true, underlying fears, hidden longings, they moved from paralyzed to a kind of traction. Didn't solve everything, but it stopped the fighting inside. Their inner house got quieter, decisions got easier, and the internal shame, that panic, settled down a notch. So, that's the heart of today's episode. If you try this just once a day for a week, you might find a kind of clarity that doesn't require you to fix everything or win at self-knowledge. You just get to be a little more usable to yourself, one honest sentence at a time. And if you care to, jot that line down, send it to someone you trust, or just reflect on it quietly. Next time, we'll talk about anchors, those things that help you stay steady while everything around and inside you keeps moving. For now, take a moment today to pause, name what's here, and let that simple act turn fog into clarity. See you next time.